DevCentral community, hello. Welcome to this first 2021 version of You Want Answers. Glad to be here personally, and glad that you're here. And we have a great show for you. We're gonna take a very quick look at some of the psychometrician data from the beginning of December. I missed out on that show, and so I wanted some of that goodness for myself as we talk about certification process, and so we're just going to talk about a few highlights there, and then I have a couple questions I got on the Python SDK back in mid-December maybe, and wanted to talk about request parameters on the iControl interface. And then it's not really a question, but there was a really cool article on the upgrade process that got dropped on DevCentral, and then a solution that is a operator of big IPs for many years is always looking for that magic carpet or that magic link between I'm on this version, I need to get to that version, how do I get there? And of course, all that stuff's in the release notes, but if you're going from one version, up many major versions, you kind of have to pick and choose that information out, all the release notes. Well, this solution has all that. So we'll go through that. And then we're going to close out as we start a new year. We're going to close out with some, how to learn. So we're all learners. If you're going for certification processes, you're learning, or you have learned that information, but you might need to brush up on stuff. And, I'm in my mid 40s now. I used to be able to pick up a book and read anything and it would, be there. That doesn't happen anymore. And keep information in. So I listened to a podcast while I was in the hospital, and Matt Harrison was the guest on the podcast, and he had a lot of good things to say and share. So I wanted to share a few of those things. So before I bring on my amazing guest, I wanted to let you know what's coming up next week on DevCentral Connects. John and I will be hosting, and we're going to talk about Visual Studio Code, which is, it's not a full-fledged integrated development environment, although some people will argue that it is, and certainly with extensions, it gets close to that. And we're going to talk specifically with Ben about the F5 extensions and go through some of his his development practices and his workflows, and how VS Code with the F5 extensions make his life easier as an F5 practitioner. And then on January 21st, John will have his episode of Security Sidebar. And then January 28th, we'll be back with DevCentral Connects, and that is Data Privacy Day. So we will be talking about data privacy on that show. All right, so we are now going to invite in the Heidi Schreifels, who is on the certification team and was part of that show I didn't get to be a part of back in December. And so we're gonna do a quick review and then move on with the rest of the show. Heidi, welcome to You Want Answers.
Thanks, it's good to be here. Good to see you.
Actually, you may be my very first live guest on You Want Answers, because I think this is episode 7, and the first 6, it's just me, so I'm never talking to anybody. I mean, I've got, of course, the audience out there, but I don't actually have anybody to interact with. So, welcome.
Thanks, it's good to be here. We missed you during the psycho call. Where we talked about certification and all the we nerded out pretty hard on the data.
Yes, yeah, and it was, I went back and watched the show, and there were a few things that I kind of wanted to just bring to the You Want Answers audience, because we have a little bit of overlap, but not everybody shows up for the same thing. So I wanted to make sure everybody had a chance. That's the wrong one. See, I'm rusty. So I wanted to, we have this wheel of validity, right, in the test development process, and I was wondering if you could walk me through in 2 minutes or less. I'm going to give you 2 whole minutes just to kind of to blaze through how we make these tests fair, reliable, and secure.
Absolutely. Well, just to start off with, currently it takes about a year to develop an exam, and it takes over 50 subject matter experts. Ken and I both know our limitations, and so we always go to the source. We go to our F5ers, customers, partners, anyone who has expertise in the domain in which we're looking to build the exam. That's who we work with to develop it. So we start out with really who should be taking this exam. We refer to that person as the minimally qualified candidate. And that starts out with just beyond the test design or where we're developing content. So we do a job task analysis to determine what should be on the exam, what we think that minimally qualified candidate should be able to do. And then from there, we develop the blueprint, which anyone who's taken a certification exam should be familiar with. The blueprint really is our guidepost. We bring every question back to that blueprint to ensure that, again, it's valid, that it's accurate, that it's appropriate for the exam. And then after the blueprint has been blessed, we develop questions for the exam, which we call items. And that includes the STEM, the little story that goes with it, the question, the correct answer, the incorrect answers. And we get a bunch of subject matter experts together. They write the questions following a very specific format after a pretty intense training on that first day of how to write a properly worded item. For any of those of you who've been in that, we kind of have ruined you for other certification exams, because you'll be able to pick out the right answer or at least a few of the incorrect, the not right answers when you're taking one of those other certification exams. Hopefully not on ours, because we do everything we can to make sure that the rules are followed, that there's only one correct answer in the options, that it's a parallel construction, that it's worded positively, all of those small things that most people don't know coming into it, but once you are done with the workshop and writing items, you're awesome at it. So after we write the items for a new version of the exam or for a brand new exam, the exam goes into beta. And this is where we have another large pool of candidates take the exam so that we can gather data and statistics about the items that perform as we would want them to, and the ones that don't, so we can remove them from the scored version of the exam. So the only items that we promote to the scored version of the exam are the ones that are true indicators that a candidate knows their stuff well enough while taking that exam, that they should receive a certification for that, or that they should pass that exam. We don't give passes to those people who don't meet that minimally qualified candidate, that score that we have set. And that, I think, coming back to the wheel of validity, always brings us back to that. We're always double checking, triple checking, making sure that at every step along the way, it is valid. So once the beta happens, we've analyzed the data, which is what we did in the last call. We went through with our psychometrician, Jill Vandenheuvel, to point out what we're looking at, why a structure of an item matters, why the content matters, why the timing of an exam matters. We look at all of those things, and then we build the scored version of the exam. Once we have that scored version of the exam out there in the wild, we're also double checking, making sure that an item that wasn't performing well didn't slip through, or we're discovering that something has changed in the technology that makes it no longer relevant. So we're always, again, looking back, double checking, making sure that the quality is there, the content is there. We always do this with subject matter experts so that they can ensure that the accuracy and quality is there. Again, coming back to validity. We want your certifications to be meaningful, and this is really the holy grail of what we follow. So I've kind of rushed through this. We do a standard setting to make sure that the items are performing well. We do one last check, and then it finally gets published to the scored version of the exam. The scored version of the exam stays out and is published for a significant amount of time for us to gather enough data and or time that it takes to then refresh, and we start all over again. And we look at everything with fresh eyes when we start over again. New group of subject matter experts, a new evaluation of the blueprint. We might refer to it, but we want to make sure that, gosh, if something has changed, that we're moving as well as we can with those changes and the evolution of the domain.
Yeah.
How did I do? Was that 2 minutes? Probably went over.
Well, it was 5, but that's okay because it's good stuff, right? And I want to kind of focus down here in this content development, review of content, and then the pre-test analyzation, because I wrote a couple questions back from a show a little while ago, and John, in the talk with Jill, blew through them so fast I didn't even get to hear what Jill thought about that. And so
Jill thought they were a great
John,
start. Jill and I both agreed, and we all agreed they were a great start. And to be fair, you have not participated in a training to do.
I haven't been in the training, and I haven't been to a workshop. But
that's true.
Before we get into this actual question, tell me just briefly about the writing workshop itself.
Yeah. So traditionally, how we've done it is we've brought a bunch of SMEs together, sequestered them in a conference room in Seattle for a week at F5 HQ, and the first day is training. The first day is how to write an item effectively. The people who are there, the subject matter experts who are there, it could be, they could range from having a lot of experience with our technology to not very much. The only criteria is that they have passed the exam that we're developing the items for. We're looking for people from all over the globe. We want folks who from our from F5, but also from our partner organization and our customer organization. Some people really excel and pick up on the writing concepts very quickly. Other people have a lot of strength in doing the review and editing of the items that maybe somebody else has written. So by having enough people in the room, we can guarantee that we're going to end up with the best possible outcome on an item that we have. And Jason, apparently I'm the person to play poker with, because you said I didn't have a very good poker face. When I saw this item, I was like, okay, this is a good start. This would not get promoted onto a beta exam, not in its initial iteration. But the cool part is the technology is there, the content is there, the idea, which I love, is there. And there were a lot of things that you got right. Just a few little minor tweaks that we would modify to make sure that then it met all of the criteria that we require for our items, so that all of those items are getting measured equally kind of against each other. And the candidate, I always say that our technology is confusing enough. We don't want to trip up or confuse our candidates. We want to be very clear with how the items are written, stick to a very predictable format so that a candidate who's taking an exam can hone in on exactly what's being asked of them. They're not confused by the answers presented. And we do that by having parallel construction, by having shorter sentences, by asking a single question, by wording the question in a positive way where we're not asking what shouldn't they do, or what, we don't use the word no.
That's not only confusing for those of us who are not exactly great at English, who are American, but it's especially challenging with the double negatives and all that for our non-native English speakers.
And you all have taken those either assessments or exams where you sit there and go, what are you asking me? I get a lot of our assessments with some security stuff wrong on those ones that we have to take internally for work, because I get confused by how it's worded. It's not clear, and we do everything we can to make sure that it's clear.
Yeah.
And then if you don't know it, you shouldn't get it right.
Right. So on the second one, on the first one, clearly, one of the things I think I heard Jill mention in the show is the choose threes. You tend to try and avoid the multi answers and stuff. So I kind of blew it there. This one, the question is pretty long and wordy.
First question with a choose three, the cool part about that is you usually have 2 questions in there. So we can take that apart and make 2 questions out of it. So those are actually not so bad. Each item is worth 1, a singular point, so you don't get partial credit. So that's why we try to keep it no more than a choose 2. Always try to keep it at choose 1.
Yeah. And so this one is one of the things that John pointed out, and I saw Jill nodding her head, like the most likely. That's problematic. It's like be precise, make sure you know what they're asking. And I think about what is most likely the problem, that particular, just the question there, not even the content, but the way I ask that, you come to this. And so I had the timestamp. Actually, I'll put it in the comments. This part of the show. Let me find it. Here we go.
The data part.
Yeah. So the data part of the show, if you guys want to go just watch that little segment, and that's in the chat. This question, and again, you don't really know any of the content here, but this question wasn't statistically flagged for the item, but it was it was flagged because of the answer. And this is the correct answer down here at D. If I can come over here without advancing. Over here at D, this is the correct answer, and only 28% of the people got it right. And you do have a spread of, in these columns, if I remember correctly, these columns are the lower scorers to the higher scorers. And so there's a spread of people who got it right across all the the spectrum of high or low to high scores. But this first answer, A, was very attractive to the test takers, and like 63.5% answered this. And it wasn't just the low scorers that answered that. It was also attractive as you went up across the spectrum. And so when you see that kind of a thing, this is flagged, and it's not necessarily that this question is not going to be on the test, but what are you guys looking at in this kind of an analysis?
Well, so for this one in particular, and this is just a random item that Jason has chosen out of all of the report that we ran when we did this with Jill earlier, and every item gets this little report on it. This is which
frankly, if I can interrupt you, is amazing. Yeah. That you go to the level of this detail, and I just from data nerd perspective, I just like staring at this stuff, and I'm like, wow. First for the mad Excel skills, because I'm not even close to that, but also just the way in which you prepare and analyze each item and each response and how people are scoring. It's amazing.
We also look at how long it took a candidate to answer that item. But so in this case, what we would do, so that number in the A column, or the A column, that's item number 1668. I would go look in our database and look at item 1668 and evaluate, like, why was option A, which is an incorrect answer as the subject matter experts have determined, why was it so attractive? Did it have a trigger word in it? Did it have a term in it? Did we mark the wrong answer incorrectly? I mean, we're human. We do the best that we can, but sometimes these happen, and so we try to look at it. Or was it just such a great? We call them distractors. Distractors are incorrect answers that are next to, and they're in there with all of the correct answers. What would make this one stand out? And then we would determine whether or not it was, along with a lot of other factors, whether or not it's something that we would want to keep or not. And Jason talked about this a little bit just a minute ago, but we're looking at, we score each of the items. We don't score the beta exams. We score each of the items to know if that candidate answered it correctly or incorrectly. And then we take that whole number, we look at all of the candidates across there, and the ones who trended toward the higher, got more of the answers right on that entire beta. We sort of measure that against those who didn't get most of the items right. And then we look at, well, why did one group or the other, or as in this one indicates, across the board, everyone seemed to be attracted to A, even though it's not the correct answer. Couple of things help. Well, the comments that candidates put into the exam when they take it, they put it on the items when they have time, tell us, like, this is also the correct answer. They believe that it is, or maybe there's something in there that's sparking that they just decide to pick it.
It's entirely possible a few comments might have come from me when I was taking my exams. It's like, yeah, this is a right answer too, and I don't feel right about answering this question, and I demand justice now.
I read them all. I read every single one of them, and I always appreciate those. I appreciate the ones that say, "Hi, Heidi." I definitely appreciate the ones that give specific, and again, this is if you have time, that give specific indicators as to why this item, in your mind, which is generally correct, is not performing well. You just have a reaction to it, and then you tell us, and we factor that into our decision whether or not we keep it or we replace it with one that performs better.
Yeah. Well, we are out of time. I could talk about this stuff forever, but I need to get on to some other things. But yes, we will do this in the future for sure. So all of the people out there who are taking exams, preparing for exams, Heidi's amazing, and the whole team there at certification is amazing. So don't be afraid to reach out. And any parting shots before we go?
We do this all for our candidates. You're the reason that we have a program. You're the reason that we have that wheel of validity and the integrity, and that's why we care about it. So thanks for always being involved. Thanks for volunteering when I ask for help developing the exams. And excited to see where we're headed next.
Yeah, me too. All right. Thank you so much, Heidi. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Happy New Year.
You too. Happy New Year.
All right. Thank you, Heidi. That was awesome. And we are going to now shift into I keep hitting that wrong button. Man, I am rusty, guys. Sorry. All right. So we had really it wasn't a question in the forums, but it was a question, and there were actually a couple of questions in there that I answered. So if you work with the Python SDK and you want to dig into request parameters, this one was it's been asked a lot actually in forums as well, and even I have to go back and review because 2 months go by and I'm like, oh wait, how did I do that again? And so the question here was, how do I select particular fields? So with the select parameter, let me see if I can grab that. Yeah, this one right here, the $select, you can take different fields. So if you don't want to return the entire JSON blob, then you can just take, in this case on a VLAN, just the name and the tag. But they also wanted the interface references as well. The problem is that the interface references is a subcollection. And so when you're doing select, well, how do I actually get to, I don't really want the collection. I want the interface out of that. The reality is you can't get it to that directly in that way. Maybe, some iControl REST experts out there, maybe you can correct me. And I'd be happy to be proven wrong in this case. But I think that the way to get at that is you have to pull the whole interface references back. And then within that, and I put the reference down here, you have to do a little bit of post-processing on that, but at least you only get the fields that you want. And then from the interface references, you would have to just glean from the JSON and that out, and to get within the items here, the name of your interface. And so you can definitely use select and subcollections together, but you have to pull that whole reference back in order to get down into the names. And again, would be happy to be proven wrong on that. And so if you are in the know and you're smarter than I am, I would love to be corrected. And so that is the big thing I wanted to focus in on that. And I did put in the SDK itself. So I put in Postman is a desktop utility. And so often when I'm, interrogating things, I'll use Postman just as to do some trial error and stuff, because it's nice, clean formatting in what's returned, and it, you can store state and use variables and all that, so you don't have to do a lot of command line jockeying. And so this is the Postman version of that. From the SDK itself, you have to instantiate an object for the big IP, which is this B, and then you just traverse the TMSH hierarchy to get the collection of VLANs And then within those VLANs, I'm using request parameters, and then sending that in a JSON blob to, do what you need to do to, and then of course the SDK then formats it in this reference when it uses when it makes the HTTP request. All right. The next thing I wanted to point out is AskFI's new Big IP upgrade guide. And this is an article on DevCentral that then points to the larger, it's not an article, it's a pretty extensive PDF, and it's got chapters upon chapters of kind of walking you through the steps. And but the really cool thing is this, that it mentions, I think it's in chapter 2, mentions this support article, and of course this support article is also linked at the bottom of this article in the comments. But the really cool thing is actually it lays out the paths for you. So I went through the solution article, and I was like, I know 9.3 and 10.2 have not been in support for a while, but I imagine there are some people who are on 9.3 still and are out of support, and 10.2 as well, maybe. But if you wanted to go from 9.3 up to 15.1, and really, we are recommending everybody get at least to 14.1. We recommend you get to 14.1 or 15.1. There's a lot of reasons for that, and we'll have a show in the near future to talk about that, and we'll bring some people on from support and other parts of the organization. It's not just that there's a plethora of new features in 14 and 15, but there's a lot of compelling arguments to move forward. And so, but I digress. The point here is, this is not necessarily a short time to move from an upgrade perspective from 9.3 to 15.1. Because if you think about, if you have one big IP, yeah, this is going to take you a little while. But if you have 50 big IPs, man, that progression, think about all the maintenance windows you're going to need, and also the artifacts that are going to get shifted from version to version to version. Because some things, when you move, some things are deprecated, some default behaviors change. And so from just the time of discovery, and then the maintenance windows to actually do the work can take quite a while. So there's some things to be said. Maybe it's not the best idea to go upgrade. Maybe there's a compelling reason to go greenfield if you have alternate systems that you can deploy to and all that. Then you move your app logic forward, but you don't actually go through the upgrade process at all. Because that's 9.3 to 15.1. That's a haul. But of course, if you're on 11, if you're on an 11.6 version right now, it's 2 hops. That's not so bad to get to 15. And so not really a question, but it was compelling, and I wanted to share it, and it's my show, so I can. All right. And finally, I wanted to talk about learning. And as I said, kind of at the top of the show, as I'm getting older, it's not as easy for me to learn as it used to be. And some of that is natural, and some of that is environmental. And we'll talk about that a little bit. And so this is the cone of learning from Edgar Dale. And if you look at, like when you go to a conference, the brain science is that if you're a presenter and you're presenting at a conference, what's the one thing you want them to learn? Because most likely anybody who sits and listens to you for an hour at your presentation, you could talk about 60 different things. They're going to walk away and they're going to remember one thing. So as a presenter at conferences, whether it's agility or user groups and all that, usually try and have one overarching theme that's the one important thing I want you to remember, because otherwise they're just not going to remember that much. And so if you just kind of go down the stack here, we remember 10% of what we read. You can see 30% of what we see, 50% of what we see and hear, if it's both. And then you get down to the bottom there, and it's like we remember 90% of what we say and do. And that comes down to something that a lot of people say is like, if you really want to know something, teach it. And so, that's certainly true. So, you can gather a concept, but if it stays in your own head, there's going to be niches that maybe you don't understand. But if you teach it, you're going to prepare yourself in a way that makes that stuff stick. And then I wanted to talk about just like some learning techniques here, and the ones that are kind of low utility, the ones that, they're effective, but they're maybe not as effective, and then the ones that are extremely effective. And distributed practice is, this is the not the college 2 a.m. start studying for your final exam practice. That's the isolated cram session, right? Distributed practice is you're going to take that learning, you're going to do it over time. So you either learn a chunk and then you come back maybe a couple days later and review it, and then almost like a decay algorithm where you spend a little bit of time, and over time the distance between that is longer, but the retention lasts a lot longer by doing so. Practice testing, this comes back to betas. If you're thinking about learning specifically for F5 or any certification program, when betas are available, being able to sign up for a beta because it's cheap, you're not going to get credit towards your certification for that, but you are going to have the ability to learn material, or at least learn what's on the material. And they said it's extremely effective. And one of the reasons is like when you're taking a practice test, you're creating memory buckets in your head. Even if you don't learn the information, you're keeping almost pointers to what that information would be because of references and questions, whether it's a visual cue or anything like that. Elaborative interrogation, asking yourself why as you read, or self-explanation. If you looked at the idea of getting things out of your head, sometimes it's you'll learn things, but you can't keep it. But saying things out loud sometimes is super helpful. And real quick, Drew, hopefully I'm saying that right. Hey, how you doing? Welcome to the show. And then mnemonics, I've got there at the bottom, say it's actually low utility. I think Sherlock Holmes would disagree with that, unless it's combining like visual mnemonics or whatever. Say that they're low utility. For me, reading right now is low utility. It's far more effective for me to see something. But that's one chart of the different kind of techniques that you can do. Use a lot of them together, and it'll be helpful. Let me move. Okay, so learning tips and tricks. And I was going to drop the link to the podcast, because Matt Harrison had a lot of really smart things to say in that will definitely expand upon what I'm sharing from that. So let me grab that real quick and drop that in the comments. It's a Python podcast, but I don't think in this particular episode they talk too much about Python. It's really about learning, and so I think that'd be a good one. But in the tips I have here, the good things that you can do to learn is take care of yourself. If you're not sleeping, if you're eating all fast food, if you're not moving, that is not conducive to a good learning process. And I realize, I'm probably talking about myself on probably all three of those things. So I need to be better at, eating well, moving my body, sleeping better. But taking care of yourself is shown that, if you're in a good position physically and physiologically, then that feeds into the mental and emotional things. And, mental health is, super important. And so take care of yourself. The other one is just walk away. And this one is, if you're stuck on a block and you can't learn something, Leslie, just basically pretend it is before time. Yeah, exactly. Walk away. And I don't know if you've seen the memes of the brain, and then the brain says something, and say, hey, are you awake? And it said, not really. And then it feeds a thought, and it's like you're wide awake. And sometimes that happens where at the end of the day, I'm working on a problem and I haven't solved the problem. I'm frustrated to walk away from my desk and 3:00 in the morning, something will pop into my head, or, you're showering or you're on a walk or whatever. Being able to step away from the problem, whatever you're stuck on learning or solving or whatever, walking away from that, and exercising or, just relaxing or whatever, oftentimes will result in solving that problem. For short-term memory, like if Kevin James is a comedian, and he talked about phone number rhythm, so you have in America here, we have effectively 9-digit phone numbers. We have our area code, and then our local exchange, and then our specific number. And so be 235-678-9823, and so you go into that, and it's like, instead, if it's easy to remember those 3 chunks of numbers. But if you kind of mix that up, it's like if I asked you in 10 seconds to memorize 9 numbers, or 10 numbers, that might be challenging to you. Oh, I said 9, but it's actually 10. I was thinking a different thing. But yeah, a phone number is 10 digits here, and so chunking it, memorizing things in chunks. And one of the examples they used on the podcast was multi-factor authentication. You get that 6 little digit code, and it's like, man, I can't remember 6 numbers in a row. But if you break it into 3-bit chunks, it's easier to remember that. Mnemonics, you talk about Sherlock Holmes' Memory Palace, at least in the new show. I'm not a huge Sherlock. I don't really know much about him outside of the show. I haven't watched all the other shows, haven't read the books. And so I don't know if the Memory Palace thing is all the way back into the 1800s, but certainly on the BBC show with Benedict Cumberbatch, his Memory Palace thing was featured quite a lot. Rubber ducking is something actually, that is used a lot in software development, but that's actually, getting it out of your head. You actually take a literal rubber duck and you talk to it. And coworkers work too, but they talk back at you, and it might not be good. And so, but the rubber ducking is you say the problem you're having or the thing that you're trying to learn, and that with your brain, it's like you're using different parts of your brain by doing that. You're activating your speech areas, and also your ear areas, and I don't know all the brain science and what all those areas are called, but by verbalizing things, it activates different parts of your brain, and it helps. For me personally, good old paper and pencil, and the science that I've reviewed before shows that if you write things instead of type things, you'll remember it a lot more. And so I keep notepads all over my desk. In fact, my problem isn't writing, my problem is organizing. So I end up with like little pieces of paper everywhere. But I remember things a lot better when I write it down. And so the not so good. These 3 things, multitasking and distractions, they can be kind of 2 things, because when you're multitasking, you're distracting yourself from the other thing. But specifically trying to work on multiple things at once is not good, and it's not helpful. And distractions, whether it's social media notifications or website notifications or emails or Slack notifications and all that, they're so detrimental. And we talk about context switching all the time, but I'll be right in the middle of trying to learn something, and I'll almost be at a point or solve a problem. So I'm writing a piece of code and I'm trying to solve a problem, and I'll almost be at the solution, but I've got it all up in my brain right at that point. And then, somebody will knock on the door, or, the phone will ring, or I see, at the corner of my eye, a message pop up on my phone, and it's like, boom, and it takes you out of that moment. And it can be a good 30 minutes sometimes to get right back to where I was. So being able to have the discipline to shut off notifications, block out a part of your day, to make sure that nobody's going to invite you to meetings, shutting Slack or Teams or, whatever your communication tools are, being able to shut those off and having bosses that are, supportive of you taking time to be undistracted so you can be super productive. The back burner thing, this is for, specifically for learning, maybe not problem solving, but this is where you deprioritize your own goals because of life or because, you're just making things that probably shouldn't be priorities. And so you just place stuff on the back burner, and learning sometimes is the victim and gets put on the back burner. But if you want to learn and you want to retain, consistency is the key. And so, don't put things on the back burner. Again, I have all this stuff on the screen. I'm sharing it with the community because it was compelling, but I'm sharing it with myself because I need to, because as I get older, not learning as easily, not learning as effectively, and so that's something that I want to be better about this year. I want to be more consistent with my learning paths. So where are all of you? How can we help you in the F5 perspective of that? What are you trying to learn that you're getting hung up on? Any of that stuff, drop comments, and maybe this year can be a year of learning for all of us together, and we'll make great strides as the industry is shifting so fast. We all have our work cut out for us. So, well, everyone, that's all I had. Leslie, I see solid advice for learning in a lot of other situations. Yep, you are very correct. And correct that it's for other situations. I'm not saying it's correct because it's solid advice. Most of it's not my advice, but I find it compelling. So we're a little over time today, but I'm glad. Thank you, Heidi, for joining me at the top of the show to dig into some of the cert details, and then I look forward to seeing everybody again next week. Again, as a reminder, DevCentral Connects, we're going to talk about Visual Studio Code with the F5 extensions, the workflow, the tools. It's going to be great. January 21st, security sidebar, and then January 28th, we're going to talk data privacy. So, thank you everyone for joining today, and we'll see you out there in the community.